All right, this is it. Week 9 attendance post. And the last thing I need to do for production for this class. I still have several of you to see. The good news is I've actually seen a couple of you already. And because of one of these, I'm going to actually remind or tell you something that some of you may know, some of you may not know about Canvas, because now I just want to talk for a minute about this is your grade, right? Because in a class like this, and it's true for any class that you're trying to gain a skill from, the hope is that you're going to walk away with that skill, at least the beginnings or some level of it. And then that largely depends on what you brought in. So, but from the grade perspective, this class was broken into half of it came from your learn together and your code along, okay, your code up. And half of it comes from the develop it work that we're doing. So you can actually, if you've been diligent, you could actually have done really well on the 50%, the code ups and the learn togethers, and not that great on the could develop it and still pass this class, right? So the key is having done well on those other parts of the class. And by the way, if you don't know this, anytime you take a class, you should really look at how the grade distribution is set so that you understand how to get to the grade that you want to get. And sometimes in classes like these, it's like, I just want to get the skill. Well, yeah, and yes, you want to also get a grade. So what I want to do now, based on that, which one more thing I want to say before I leave, I do accept late work, but I am no longer going to take work after Wednesday night of next week. And this is the week 9, right? So if you have work you want to turn in late, then make sure you've turned it in on or before Wednesday night at midnight. Because then Thursday I'll catch up grading, and that way you'll know where you're at, which, by the way, do it before then if you want to see how it impacts your grade. So here's what I want to show you, though. You've got the part about late work, right? So in this case, I've actually changed my Canvas view to be the student view. And in here, there is this grade, of course. And this is not anyone's grade. This is just based on Canvas switching over. And so what you have is you have items that have been graded. And one thing you can do, especially on this last develop it or anything that you may have missed that you're wondering, how could that affect my grade? So let's just simulate this idea. Like, let's say you didn't do today's and you're going to do it this weekend. Well, the most you could get is 75%. That's if you did everything, which, by the way, several folks at this point in your app development, you needed to have those CRUD operations, the create, capturing user input, the reading user input, displaying it on the page, updating it, and deleting it. Now, if you didn't have the delete or the update, I was a little more understanding. But if you didn't have those basic functions, it hurt you this week, right? And some of you did, and some of you didn't. But obviously, well, not obviously, but you know how that affects you. But here, back to this, right? So, but let's say on the develop it, right? You're trying to figure out, and the key is also, in order for you to see what are you going to get in this class, obviously this is a bad grade, but what you would do is, these are already grades that are filled out. If it's a 0, right, and you're like, you know what, I could actually get that done, right, 75% if you really get it done, then what happens is up at the top, it shows we're looking at the what if score. And then if you want to revert back to actual scores, which I recommend after you do this, then you can. But what this really allows you to do is ask that question, what do I need to get on Develop It 2 to pass this class? You need 70 or above to pass. Okay, you have to have a C in this class to pass the class. Got it? Does that help? Is there any questions about that? Now would be a great time to ask if you do have any questions about that. So it's so funny. I was kind of waiting, like, are you going to ask me? Anyway, I wanted to be clear about that. And for your last, I actually just released a few minutes ago. I did it yesterday and that I forgot to release it, but I'm guessing most of you would not have looked at it because most of you were looking at Learn Together 8 last night. But I released Learn Together 9. I did spend a little more time there at the end going over some of the functionality code-wise that I added. And I'm pretty happy because I'm done for the most part. I did everything and a little more of what I wanted to do for the project, for the Dev 2. So I'm excited about that. Okay. Just one more time, because I think it's important. I'm going to leave this and just remind you, because I've added one thing that's not in Canvas that I want you to know, and it's about the calendar, right? So I'm not sure why it went there. Let's go to the calendar. So on the calendar for this class, we'll move over to 93, right? We'll move, we're into October. Oh my goodness. So this is it, right? So next week on the 9th, I've added that new item. So at the same night, your last Learn Together, right? And you do have a code up, but again, I've modified, so pay special attention unless you want to do all of section 10, which if you do, you do. It's all good content. And I hope you do actually take more of this course because I think it's excellent. But in this case, right, you have on Wednesday night is the Learn Together, and that will also be when the last date I will take any late work. And then you have, of course, this is due. And I have appointments all through the week. Like I said, I've already had several yesterday and today. And so the attendance is supposed to be first thing that morning. But just to be clear, I am traveling. I leave way early on Friday, and I'm not back on campus until Tuesday. But grades are actually going to be due Monday. So if there's any questions about your grade, you're going to want to ask me sooner rather than later. And remember, that's the last date I'm taking any late work at all. Okay. Okay, so I don't think I need to go over mine because I already talked about it in your Learn Together 9. I will say again, if you don't have all the CRUD operations working for week 9, it will hurt you like it did on week 8. But more importantly, it'll hurt you in the code review, right? To have that code ready to go. And it will hurt because you need to have all those. And again, remember, we're just using this term A to get you used to it because you're going to hear it in the industry if you continue on, and B to help us kind of organize just a higher level what our apps need to do, right? They need to accept user input. They need to store that into local storage. They need to display it back on the page, right? You need to give users the ability to update the information they give you and the ability to delete. And how you accomplish that varies, of course, which is where the rub comes sometimes, right? Because we all have different ideas about the way we want things to do, but you need to follow the style that we've learned in this Andrew's course. Like as an example, I know Jared mentioned this, like he used to, when he would build HTML out of his JavaScript code, he would do it more in the style of just enter HTML quotes and then put the HTML. But that's not the way Andrew showed us. And actually Jared was saying he started using this method because it does look cleaner. And it is the style of document.createElement. But where that gets a little tricky is just when you're rendering a complex page dynamically through code. And I had this a little bit on mine. I had to really understand that process more deeply than before. The idea that you create elements that maybe you put in other elements. As an example, a very common one in this case would be an input element, right? But I wanted to wrap the input element in a label. So first I'd create the label with document.createElement label, and then I would actually attach the label. Then I would create the input, and then I would pen child that into the label, right? So it's understanding like that layering idea of what do you do based on the way you want it to show up on the page. So that's one of the things, like, and I've talked about var, like don't be using var unless you have a good reason, right? So that kind of stuff, and defining your functions, right? Const function name, using arrow functions wherever possible. That's the other thing I will look at during code reviews. So, but we've gone over some of this, but again, this is and CSS, right? So one of the things, if you don't have any background in CSS, there is great examples out there. I talked to somebody about one today. Like you could do this. I think this is how I found it. Simple Flexbox examples. This was a great one because it basically just gave you different examples of like card might be one you want to use. It's a lot of Flexbox there, but how about this one, right? So just the idea of a header, right? A nav, title. So it gives you other examples. Also gives you some nice form examples, right? So your CSS doesn't have to be really complicated. But in this case, right, if you wanted to have your nav on this side, a header, maybe what goes on, your main stuff goes on here in the article, then what you would do here is look at this would be your CSS, right? So you could define style.css, link it into your index file, and then here is all you'd have to do. So nav over here, class, column 1, right? So you could go look at, oh, okay, I see there's a background color, flex 1, and that's really about the way that they flex when you look at it on maybe mobile devices or desktops. And what you can do here is actually just go look at how that's done, and then you can hit inspect, right? And let's see, how would it look on a Pixel? Okay, so it actually still looks really good on a Pixel. How about on let me see, do we have a lower phone? Yeah. So in this case, because of viewport, right, you could actually make it like you could do it here, right? So I could actually say, oh yeah, see now I start to see that flex a little differently. And you can look at how it flexes. But the idea is that it has at least a little style. Looks good. It's got some color. You can change those colors to what you want, right? So, and some of you have done a nice job. I actually commented today if your site looks good, and some of you obviously brought in some CSS skills, but it doesn't have to be a ton. And that was my whole discussion about that. Okay. All right. So thank you, by the way, very much for this class. I have learned, I've deepened my own knowledge of JavaScript, which I appreciate. And I know the format has been challenging, but some of you, it worked well. You told me that. So what I would do, I have suggested that next semester we actually run it in the 18-week mode. I believe they're going to do that on the schedule right now, and you haven't seen it yet if you haven't registered, if you're interested in those classes, especially if you're not taking Node.js and you want to take it next semester. It'll be in the 18-week semester format. So if you have any questions about any of that, please let me know. Otherwise, in your reply, if you feel like doing it there or if you feel like giving it to me directly, I always appreciate your feedback about this class. How could I make it better? I mean, I know about the format, and if you want to tell me more about that, that's cool. The idea is that students' feedback is intended to make us better instructors, and without it, sometimes we're shooting in the dark. Luckily, I, through this semester, have been talking to people and getting some of that. But if there's anything you'd like me to know, please let me know. Okay. Otherwise, peace out. And next week's interesting schedule-wise. I've already said this. So know if you reach out to me and you just want to chat, if I can do it, I will. Know that I am pretty booked between the two classes. But, next week is we'll figure it out. Let's say it that way. We will just figure it out. All right. Peace out. Have a good one. It's nice to meet you, however I met you.